everyone, and welcome once again to Folks. Our first story today features a man who was born right here in Louisiana, a man who happens to be one of the nation's top legislators. His name is William Gray, Congressman William Gray. Since 1978, he has represented Pennsylvania's 2nd Congressional District. On January 4th, 1985, the House Democratic Caucus elected Gray the 5th chairman of the House Budget Committee, making him one of the most powerful men in Washington.
I don't take it seriously at all, because in my line of work, you better not start reading the press clippings and taking them serious, because if you do, you're going to miss the target. I've been elected by my colleagues to help shape fiscal policy and budgetary policy of the United States House of Representatives. It's a tremendous opportunity, particularly in your 4th term in Congress, to be able to chair such a committee where you're really deciding what are going to be the priorities of the federal budget, where you're going to invest the $1 trillion of taxpayers' money, how much you're going to spend in housing, how much you're going to spend in education, how much for national defense, how much you're going to spend to rebuild the roads and to help with natural disasters like hurricanes and flooding. Those are the kinds of decisions that you handle in the budget. The budget is the entire federal government. And so, being a Baptist preacher, I look at it as really an opportunity to help determine where our treasure is, and thus where our heart is.
Gray also holds the distinction of being the first black to chair this powerful committee.
I think it's a challenge, being the first black, a challenge to perform, a challenge to be an example for others in my community. And hopefully, by the work that I've done, I'll lay a foundation so that others may be able to go a little bit higher. And I really see my work as chairman of the Budget Committee as a continuation of the work of others who've gone before me. I mean, the work of a Gus Hawkins or a Perrin Mitchell or Bill Clay or Lou Stokes or an Adam Clayton Powell or a Charles Dawson, who through the years have demonstrated leadership and qualities of excellence, which therefore I think influenced my colleagues to have faith that I could do the job.
In addition to his career in politics, Congressman Gray is also a minister. Since 1972, he has been the senior minister at the Bright Hope Baptist Church in North Philadelphia. In addition to your duties as a lawmaker, you are also a minister. But there are some people who feel that politics and religion should not mix, citing the moral majority. But you appear to be doing both successfully. How do you manage?
Well, I just think that, if faith is real, if religion is real, it's not just something that you shout up from the pew, sing up from the choir loft, and preach up from the pulpit. It's something that you live every day in every aspect of your life. And so therefore your faith, your religion ought to inform your politics, just like it ought to inform your recreation, your work, and every other aspect. And so I see no conflict between being a person of faith and also being involved in the political arena. Because in a real sense, one could say, what are you doing with the budget? You are deciding where to put the federal resources, and one of those concerns is with the least of these, our brethren. And so in a real sense, it gives you an opportunity to minister at a higher level if you want to look at it that way. But of course, I don't look at it as my creed, my faith. We are in a pluralistic society. And one of the things that you've got to be careful about is that you don't legislate your own dogma, your own creed, your own particular traditions.
Congressman Gray spent his early childhood years at 949 20th Street in Baton Rouge. Nothing left now but memories. But Gray says never in his wildest dreams did he think he would grow up to be a legislator in the U.S. House of Representatives.
No idea of that. When I was born at Lady of the Lake Hospital and lived at 949 North 20th Street with my grandparents, no, I never had any idea that would happen. And in fact, in those days, that was far removed for a black person to aspire to doing those kinds of things. But I think that one of the things that it demonstrates is how far we've come as a nation, how we've progressed, and also that the dream that a Martin Luther King Jr. had is becoming real throughout this country. It's not fully realized. It may not ever be perfectly realized, but when you look around and see in New Orleans a Dutch Morial, when you look in Atlanta and see an Andrew Young, and before him a Maynard Jackson, Carolina, a Harvey Gantt, when you see the way the South has become a land of prosperity and booming industry and economic development because folks stopped fighting with each other over the color of skin and started working in order to build for the common good, I think that the dream is being realized, and I remember Martin King, and I remember my time here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and only in America can one have dreams and hopes and visions, and only in America could we bring about change.
Gray is a strong critic of the apartheid movement in South Africa. He recently visited there and shared with us his thoughts about the trip.
It was a trip that I had to take because last year I was the author of the Anti-Apartheid Act, which basically imposed sanctions on the South African government, bipartisanly and overwhelmingly supported, which got the administration to change its policy and the president to apply limited executive sanctions. What we wanted to do was to find out what was the reaction of the South African people to that change of policy. Not just the apartheid government headed by President Botha, but also the majority population, the labor leaders, the religious leaders, the community, the parents, to see what their reaction was. And secondly, to find out firsthand, had there been any progress made in ending apartheid, dismantling it, and were there any plans for power sharing and moving to end apartheid? Unfortunately, I came back with some impressions that were discouraging. The first one was the amazing hostility that the majority population had toward America because they perceived America as being the #1 partner or co-conspirator with apartheid. I remember one woman that I was talking with, a black woman in Soweto, trying to tell her that Americans don't support apartheid, and she said, well, why did your president say when our children were shot down that they were creating violence and it was black policemen who shot them anyway? And so I think we've got a major perception problem there, which is hurting America's interest in the long term.
Congressman Bill Gray of Pennsylvania. Our next story features women's fashions. It's a story that we first aired last fall. What makes this story interesting are the models. Here's Sonya Masingale.
98% of the people who lose a significant amount of weight gain it all back, usually within a year. A few brave people discovered that nearly a third of the American female population wore a size 14 or larger, and these women led full, active lives for which they could not find pretty clothes to wear. But things have changed. Meet Judith Ann Egan, New York fashion designer who has recently launched a highly successful line of clothing for the full-figured woman.
I've been a large size off and on several times in my life. I actually got into the dress business because at one point I was about 200 pounds and I could not find young, fun clothes for myself. And I was in the crafts business and I was working in third world countries, and I started making my own clothes because the clothing wasn't right for me. Then there was a tremendous acceptance all of a sudden in the market that the customer and the person was a human being. It seemed to all come together very quickly. It was always a chicken and egg story. You know, they don't want nice clothing. Polyesters are good enough for them. They wouldn't pay for expensive clothing. Nobody would acknowledge a woman could be heavy, she could be sensual, she had weddings to go to, she got married, her daughter got married, she was beautiful. You know, a few Elizabeth Taylors, but nobody wanted to acknowledge the heavier person as a real person with all the same living standards that the thin person had. It's tremendous prejudice. I mean, I see it in our showroom and all of a sudden a few people started making stores and they started selling the clothing and people started getting dressed up. The 60s faded away when you had to have a certain classic look and there's more allowance for a broader spectrum. And it was a time to say, let's cater and give these women some beauty. I mean, because they're beautiful women, many of them, and they can just come out.
Madeline Sparks, a former Ford model, works for Judith Ann, developing and promoting her Judith Ann Plus line. A charming, dynamic saleswoman, Madeline enjoyed a successful career as a model because of her full figure.
I never wanted to be a model. I never grew up thinking I was going to be a model or could be a model. When I moved to New York, I moved to New York to pursue a theater career in directing and producing, stage managing, as well as acting. I mean, that was my background. And when I moved there, someone came up to me and asked me if I wanted to be a model. And at first I thought they were going to say, well, you've got to lose 50 pounds and all this other stuff. And they said, no, just like you are. So I did it for the money initially. At the time, it was in 1978, they paid $75 an hour. It's gone up quite a bit since then. And I just needed the extra money to live in New York City to take my acting classes. And before I knew it, I was a full-time model and working at it all the time, and had really put my theater career on a back burner because I got very involved in pursuing developing the full-figured market, especially. So I never really wanted to be a model, but that's how I got into it.
Tara Messenger is founder of Women at Large, a support group for large-sized women. The mother of two, Tara divides her time between family, business, and pursuit of her master's degree in social work.
I started it as the result of a research project that I did in the Graduate School of Social Work. I was interested in the problem, being a large-sized woman myself, and I did a lot of reading and research about it, and I thought it would be a nice way to help other women think better about themselves and gain more self-esteem and confidence and be the best they could be, no matter what size they were.
Success is built on self-esteem. The woman who overcomes society's stereotypes to attain success must first feel good about herself.
Although I prefer being thin to being heavy, whether I'm 150 or 200 pounds, I have never not worn my makeup. I have never not gotten my hair done. I have never not put on beautiful clothing if I could, and I've always felt beautiful. I mean, I might have had an Elizabeth Taylor kind of put more makeup on kind of look, but I always felt wonderful, and I wear a bikini at 200 pounds and at 150.
I think as large-sized women are learning to accept themselves for what they are and stop on the diet merry-go-round and stop feeling bad about being their weight, but accepting themselves and saying, I'm going to be the best I can be today and the best I can be tomorrow. And if I'm 5 pounds less or 10 pounds less or 50 pounds less a year from now, that's a year from now. Right now, I'm going to be the best I can be. So I'm going to go to this wedding, or I'm going to go on this business trip, or I'm going to go to this party, and I'm going to look fabulous, and I'm going to be myself. And I think as we learn to do that with ourselves and make the best of ourselves, that other people will accept us, and the prejudices are breaking down. You know, the fact that we have a lot of large-size models in this country now, which is something that never existed. When I first started, I was one of the first ones, and we really experienced a lot of negativism toward our being models. There are big careers out there now with girls in large sizes. You know, it really has changed, and as we're in the magazines, and the more that comes out about health, and the more preoccupied our country is, I think, with being too thin, I think we have the backlash of saying, you know, being mentally healthy and emotionally healthy is just as important. And I think that's just going to get better and better.
Society dictates a lot of fashion trends and ideals, and I'm not exactly what most of the population would say is the perfect size woman, but then on the other hand, I don't have to live my life in accord with these dictates. And I think that I have to live my own life, and I have to make the best of it. And if that means that I'm going to be a size 16 plus, then I'm the one that has to deal with that, and I just have to make the best of it and accept myself as just like I am, and for who I am and what I am, and be the best person that I can.
For those of us in the baby boom, there are more of us, and we're bigger than any other part of the population. And we're bigger in numbers, and we're bigger in our weight, because Americans tend to gain weight, and 99% of us may lose it, but we gain it back. So there's about 33 million large-sized women out there who wear over a size 16 who are adults. And that figure isn't going to change. It's going to get larger. And we are a force in our economy. We are a force in our society. And we're out there, and the fact that designers are recognizing that we're there, I think means that the whole future of this as something that maybe one day it won't be newsworthy, you know? Maybe one day talking about full-figured fashions or designs just won't have any other importance than talking about a regular size. And that is a day I look forward to.
Gotta be in love with your body, gotta love it up. Gotta be in love with your body.
Marsalis is a respected name in the world of jazz. There's Winton and Bradford, two young men with a relentless dedication to serious music. But long before the famous brothers, there was Ellis.
Meet Ellis Marsalis, father of famous sons and a legend in his own right in jazz circles. For nearly 30 years, Ellis has been performing and teaching jazz, inspiring young musicians and raising 6 sons, supporting his family with music.
I knew from very young that I wanted to play music. I don't think I dealt with the professional aspect of it until many years later. It was something that I enjoyed doing, and the music profession in the New Orleans area was not structured in a professional way in terms of what we know the term professional to mean today. You could work, but mostly it was sort of like just hustling. You know, it was like we call a hustle. And the more involved I got with music, the more articulate I found that I needed to be in terms of the knowledge of music, the facility on an instrument, and I had to practice more and study to try and understand the more sophisticated elements of jazz.
He studied at Dillard University in New Orleans. After graduating, he joined the Marine Corps. After military service came marriage and eventually the beginning of the modern Marsalis legend. Bradford was born.
Bradford and Winton are 11 months apart. And the third and fourth kids are 11 months apart.
Were you active in parenting your children?
Not a whole lot. My wife was much more disciplinary and the nurturer, and you know, I mean, I had to do my share of punishing. But when it came to it, I don't think I really understood what parenting was at all until much later. I think essentially what I did was to try and make sure I had enough money to pay the rent and buy some food, which is almost like a 19th century version of parenting. I did try always to support my kids in whatever they happen to be doing. Like they would play on these little league teams, and I'd always try to be there as long as I could if I had a job, because I recognized how important that was. And but for the most part, I don't think I was I was not a very imaginative parent at all. I didn't come up with very many unique ideas.
How did you react to your children wanting to become musicians?
I was happy for them. I didn't really have musical aspirations for them. You know, I was not a stage father. And I've thought about that because people have asked me about that. And I think the reason why I wasn't a stage father was because I never did stop playing. It wasn't like the frustrated athlete who didn't make it to the pros.
Wynton and Branford Marsalis have become household names in jazz, but according to Ellis, the best is yet to come.
The littlest one is 8. He seems to be more musical than all of us. Plays drums and violin when he feels like it. And listens to records all the time. Can sing John Coltrane solos. You know, has perfect pitch. Has sat at the piano and pounded out about 3 of his own songs. I mean, he shows more musical promise than any of the rest of them did at that age. You know, but given the kind of society that we live in today, I mean, you just don't know, you know. I mean, there again, you know, I don't care if he becomes a musician or not. I would just like to see him develop his talent and his skills along the lines which contribute to his personal growth. And if it takes him into music, fine. If it takes him through it on into something else, that's fine also.
This is an original composition, fairly new vintage, entitled On Time.
Well, it's always nice when we can feature great talent like that on the program. Well, that's a wrapper for this week. Thanks for watching. We hope you can join us again next week for another edition of Folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.